So now that you have like a good bit of the grounding, the background in how I came about my diagnosis, like I said, this is what's for me. I can't say this is for everyone because I do understand that some people it just genetically happened, but for me, I do believe that the somatic aspect, the somatic explanation of the factor of how I got my diagnosis or how I came about with Graves' disease. But the funny story is, even though I did live pretty healthy, I was very health conscious. I have had health scares a couple of times, and it has a lot to do with my energy as a human design manifester. I kept, as I explained to you, I kept trying to live a life as a generator. And I'm not going to just say as a human design generator, but as a human design manifesting generator, which, or, or they just naturally have a lot of energy and they can push through so many things and they can do so many things. But my energy was never meant to push through, it was meant to, as I told you, initiate, spark, start things, get things moving. I'm the one that's supposed to have people excited about things, get them moving into it, and get them going, and from there, let them take off with it. But instead, because I was such a people pleaser, I would initiate it, and then I would get stuck with the responsibility of carrying it through and carrying it out, which basically burnt out my system. And it would happen pretty often, but because I was younger then and I didn't understand what was taking place and I didn't really know human design then at that time, I couldn't explain what was going on with me. But I'm going to tell you about the times that I've had burnouts before. Even though I still maintained a healthy life, and I ate very good. So at this time, I'm going to say one of the very first episodes, even when I was a young child, being a young child, my first episode is that I would always have tonsil problems. I had tonsillitis every time you would turn around. My tonsils were swollen, um, but my tonsils were never removed. My tonsils would stay inflamed, and me, my mom, we would take care of them at home because again, my mom was a nurse, and we took care of them. The inflammation would go down. They never got to the point where they were infected. I've never had mono or any of those other things like that. Actually, even as a child, I don't even remember having the flu or getting a cold or anything like that. But I would always have swollen tonsils. Not just that, but I also sucked my thumb all the way to the age of 14, but don't tell anyone. So those were basically signs that let you know that there was something that was keeping me quiet, and my body was already trying to tell me, was fighting against me being quiet. I have always supposed to be the outspoken one, but I learned young that I couldn't be the outspoken one. So those were signs then that I didn't even know. So moving on to later on in life, about the age of, I'm going to say, I must have been about 27 years old. This was right after my second daughter that my second burnout happened in my life. So this happened right after I had my second daughter. So with my first daughter, I had a C-section, and with my second daughter, I had a C-section. Well, with all of three of my kids, I had a C-section. My first one, it was not selected. It was like an emergency surgery. So of course, when you go to your second child after, in certain states, you cannot do a VBAC. So I had to have another C-section. So after having my second child, she was still about like 6 months old, and I was getting over my C-section. I was trying to go back to work. So you have to take into account that I have a child, and my two daughters are a year and a half apart from each other. So that my first child was still just 6 months old. Not 6 months. I'm sorry. My first child was just about 1 year old, and I was getting ready, and I had just had my second child, and I had just came out of having a C-section. Um, and at this time, even though my daughter was 6 months old, yes, I was a single mother. Um, I got involved with Your dad, he was a hot boy. I'm gonna say he was one of those street boys. Let's just leave it at that. Let's just leave it at that. I was young, I was dumb. Of course, when you go through traumatic experiences as a child, you don't really think through things very much. Anyway, so yes, I was a single mother with a 6 month old. Both my daughters have the same dad, so after my second one, I just knew, okay, look, hot boy, you're gonna have to go back to the streets. So he had to go back to the streets. So now we are looking at the fact that I just had a C-section. I have a 1 year old and a 6 month old that I'm taking care of by myself, and I'm trying to go back to work. And also, I have this energy type where I am not really able to process a lot of energetic tasks all at once. So at that time, my body basically that's when I had my first, or should I say, second burnout. Again, I didn't eat bad. I didn't eat heavily greasy foods or anything like that. I pretty much was vegan at that time. Um, at nights, it was like I would have a very sharp pain in the right side of my stomach. I didn't know what it was, but I would have extreme pains. One day I woke up and I was supposed to go into work, but I couldn't make it into work that day. I knew I couldn't make it into work that day. I got up, I got my two daughters together, I took them to the daycare. And as soon as I took them to the daycare, I went straight into the emergency room. When I got to the emergency room and I finally got to see a doctor, the doctors actually asked me, "How did you get here?" And I told them I drove myself here, and they said, "How did you even manage to drive yourself here?" That's just how bad it was. As soon as the doctor saw me, I went straight into emergency surgery. I went into emergency surgery and I had my gallbladder removed. Again, there was no reason for me to have gallstones, which caused my gallbladder to be so corroded, and that was causing the nightly pains that I was having. Is because I had gallstones. So I went in and I had an emergency surgery, and they removed my gallbladder. Well, so then later on in life, I'm realizing that chronic stress is what causes gallbladder issues. Of course, I didn't know that then at the age of 25. These are things that I'm learning now in my later years. But to go back to it, as I stated, that I had an emergency surgery. That was my first burnout. Not knowing that I was just trying to do more than what I could actually handle, and trying to keep it under wraps when I couldn't. So that was my gallbladder. My gallbladder was gone. That was one of my second burnouts. I'm gonna say my third burnout when my body was telling me that enough is enough. You're doing too much. You're pushing too much. This is later in my life after having my son. This is actually this is so funny because with this part right here, I never was diagnosed with an overactive thyroid, but I'm gonna tell you now that I have my diagnosis, I can pretty much tell you that at that time I did go through uh, a thyroid storm. But the doctors at that time, they did not diagnose it as a thyroid storm or overactive thyroid. What happened then at that time? I maybe was about the age of 32 years old. I had my son by then because I had my son when I was 30 years old, and it was just like life was really hard for me. I'm gonna say that of course, even though I was with my son's dad, it was still like I was a single parent, because he was a truck driver. He was always going on the road. He was not there. And then when he was there, he was a jerk. He was this guy. He wasn't a bad guy. It's just that he was oblivious to life. So how some guys they just I don't know. He wasn't a bad guy. He just was oblivious to life and what you were supposed to do. So again, basically, it was like I was a single mom raising three kids and dealing with his stress at the same time. So it was a lot of stress that I was taking on at that time. And I actually went into the my doctor's office and I explained to them at that time. I said that I feel extremely weak. And I don't mean like weak, like I just need a nap. I explained to them that I feel so, my body feels so heavy that I feel like a leather coat on a wire hanger. That's literally how I could explain it to them. The doctor that I was seeing at the time, they basically explained it to me as what, like sundowning. Basically, like during the winter time, you get depressed because the sunlight is not out. And they kind of explained it as that, and they also explained it as a high amount of anxiety with depression. So that's basically what they contributed to, is anxiety and depression. So at that time, they wanted to put me on a lot of anxiety medication. So, and I was like, no, I'm not. You're not gonna put me on these anxiety medications because, as I said, I'm really into natural health care, really into taking care of myself. You know, and I'm doing massage therapy work. I can't, and then not just that. I have a young child. My son at the time maybe was like 2 years old, in between 1 or 2 years old, and I had my two daughters. I'm like, there's no way that you're gonna put me on these anxiety medications where I can't even function to take care of my kids, and I'm their sole provider. No, no way at all. So at that time, that's when I became, and not gonna say became. That's when I really took on the complete alkaline diet. At that time, I had been listening to Dr. Sabia's things like that, and so I was really like, okay, I'm just gonna go all out, go all in. I completely did the alkaline diet at that time, and I was really, really focused on my meditation and doing my yoga work. Then, and like I said, I was younger then. I was about 32 years old, so I went completely in. Did my alkaline diet every day. I would get up. I would do my hot lime water. I only ate basically, chickpeas. you know, I'm gonna say a lot of the vegetables that had a lot of protein in them. Um, Extreme, like I'm just gonna say, extreme alkaline diet. I just went all the way in, and actually, I recovered. I honestly recovered. So I think at that time, I actually put my overactive thyroid into remission at that time, and even without the doctor's help, because I was just like, no, you're not gonna put me on that heavy medication. So that was, I'm gonna say, about my third incident when I had a burnout. But at that time, it was basically, they just wrote it off as extreme anxiety and depression. So we're gonna move on after I recover from that. And let me just throw this in here with all these different things that are going on. My grandmother actually gave me a nickname. My grandmother gave me this nickname. She called me the cat, and my mom would always say, your grandmother called you a cat, and I was like, well, why does she call me a cat? And she would say, because your grandmother said that girl, she may fall, but she always land on her feet. And I was just like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, grandma. I was like, yeah, I'm damn good at, I'm really good at falling, but I don't know if I'm landing on my feet or not. But yeah, I keep going. So, anyways, it's just something that made me think about it with all of the different burnouts and things that I had. My grandmother is saying that the girl's like a cat. She fall down, but she lands on her feet. So, moving on from my third situation, my third burnout. Um, I'm gonna move into like I'm gonna say the fourth thing that happened to me as a burnout. This is now, I'm about 40 years old at this time. So this is about 41. I was 41 at the time. Um, and so this was about, for me, 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, because I'm currently 43 years old. But so this was about the age of 41. And at this time, again, I'm still single parenting, but I had just newly moved to a new city. I had just newly moved to San Antonio with my three kids, by ourselves, just us. I had separated from my son's dad at that time. Um, not just that, but when we first moved, it was during COVID. So we moved here to San Antonio during 2020. Um, it was during COVID. So I had to. I took on the responsibility. I chose to move, yeah, because I wanted something a little different. I needed to get out of the relationship and everything like that. So I moved my family to San Antonio, and during that time, I'm gonna say it was a lot of changes going on in my personal family dynamics. Not just me leaving my son's dad, but my two daughters were going through their preteen years. They were going through all of the different ups and downs. So my middle child really took it hard moving to another state, and she really got caught into a lot of hard things, bad places. So that was another thing I had to take on. Not just that, just trying to keep up with taking care of my family, household bills, keeping things together, just keeping myself together, keeping my sanity together. And in that aspect of things that was going on, I actually got evicted, and this was because it was around COVID time again, and I couldn't work. This was right at the end of COVID, so um, me being evicted, my daughter at the time, my middle child at the time, going through some. That's the best way I can say it. Some things. As you can see, that was a lot of stress to take on by myself. So one day, after all of this stuff started to kind of accumulate, I just knew something wasn't right. I knew something wasn't right because, like, I kept feeling like pressure up in the right side of my chest. It would come from like my arm to my chest, and I knew because, like, when I had my C-sections, how it felt to have gas trapped inside of your body. So I thought it was just gas that was trapped inside of my body. And actually, the funny part about it is, I decided to just give my sisters a call the night before all of, I mean, that same night when I was feeling all this. And I called them, and I was just like, I wanted to talk to them just to see how they were doing. And so I talked to my sisters, and so then, I explained to them, I think I just have a lot of gas that I'm dealing with. So the next day when I woke up, I actually went into work, and it was like, as I was going through the day of work, uh, my chest began to hurt me so bad that, like, as if when I take a breath in, I couldn't even completely complete my breath that I was taking in. Um, and to, like, exhale, oh, something's in my eye. And to, like, exhale, it would hurt so bad. So I managed to tough it out through my day of work. I got off, and I went to go pick my two daughters up from school. Well, actually, before I went to go pick them up from school, because they had after school practices, I picked my son up from school. And when I picked him up from school, no, it was I picked him up from his karate practice, and I was in so much pain as I was picking him up from karate practice that I basically passed out in the car. I got myself back together. I picked him up. Then I went to my oldest daughter's school, and I picked her up from school. And from there, picking my oldest daughter up from school, she drove me to the emergency room. When I got to the emergency room, again, it was right then and there. They did the x-rays and everything. They sent me straight into emergency surgery. Uh, at that time, they found out that my right lung was filled with blood clots. Never, ever, ever had I had any kind of health problems. Never had pneumonia. Never had COVID. Nothing that would contribute to having blood clots. This was basically my body just going through a burnout. Just too much stress at one time. So I went through that aspect. Basically, after going through getting the blood clots removed, being on blood thinners for a while, I took myself off the blood thinners by basically, again, natural health. I took black seed oil and different herbs and supplements to help myself to recover from that. So that was basically my fourth time I did a burnout because I was overstressed. I'm going to say about my fifth burnout, that's when I finally began to get the diagnosis for my Graves' disease. Within my fifth time of going into my burnout, this is around the time when I met my husband, who I am married to now. So this was all new. I just knew, at this time, I just knew that I could not keep trying to take on or carry my three kids, bills, responsibility, and everything by myself. I knew it now. I knew it now. I just knew it was too much for me. It was too much. So at that time, I had just made it into my marriage with my husband that I'm married to now. Um, but new marriages, new marriages, they're still hard. Okay, so and I still was going through the process of the things with my middle daughter, who was at the time going in 15, 16 now, and she was going through a lot of different things then. So new marriage, my troubled teen, also my other teen getting ready to go graduate from high school, and still having my young son with me. A lot to carry. So this is when I kind of went into my fifth burnout, but this is when it got to be closer to my diagnosis, because even before my fifth burnout, um, after the blood clot, I went through a spat of having basically where you feel like you're spending all the time, all around all the time. Yeah, give me forget the name of it. I'll come back to it and I'll tell you the name of it again. But if your inner ear being off balance, I couldn't hear out of my right side of my ear. My right side of my face felt completely swollen. I went through that for a while. Um, Again, herbs, supplements, and exercises to help me with that. So then after that, I basically one day I just felt that sharp chest pain again, and I just didn't know what it was. And me and my husband, we were actually going for a walk. We were hiking the trails here, hiking the trail here in San Antonio, and I began to feel the pain again. And so then I decided to go straight to the emergency room after feeling this pain. When I got to the emergency room again, right then and there, they were like, you need to go straight. We need to do treatments for you. Found out that my right lung, part, my partial part of my right lung had collapsed. So I went through oxygen therapy for 3 days in the hospital to recover the right portion of my lungs. From there, I got to go home, and I just basically did breathing exercises to help strengthen my lungs. After that, so that was about the fifth burnout. Is when I found out about my the right portion of my lung collapsing. It was that was scary. Then I just realized, I just knew, I said, I'm not gonna die from stress. I'm not gonna let myself die from stress. Then I just knew it was stress. It was stress then. So after that, I started to have other little symptoms or whatever else. But then that's when the fatigue came on again. This is now me moving into my diagnosis. This is like after the collapsed lung. Then I started to move into the extreme fatigue again. And then this time I had the tremors along with it. I got tremors along with it. And so then I went to the emergency room and explained to them that the extreme fatigue, again, the heavy feeling like the leather coat on the wire hanger. And right then and there, it didn't even take them any time. They was like, well, yeah, because you have an overactive thyroid. And I was like, so thinking back to my first time, I was like, well, why when I went to the first one back when I was 32 years old, they didn't even say it was an overactive thyroid. But anyways, it didn't take them no time. They was like, you have an overactive thyroid. So from there, I was basically scheduled to start seeing I was scheduled to see my primary care doctor, and of course my primary care doctor scheduled me to see and I forget my specialist that I see for my Graves' disease. Wow, why can't I think of the name of it? That's what you call brain fog. That is what you call brain fog, when you really know but you can't remember. Anyway, so, and it'll come to me. So in another episode, you'll hear me say the names of these things. No problem, no problem at all. But I was scheduled to go see my doctor that helps me with my Graves' disease, and yeah, from there, I was pretty much on my way to getting my diagnosis for my Graves' disease. So now you have the backstory, and that's how I got into my diagnosis of Graves' disease.